Good evening, sir. Wherever you are watching us from on behalf of the Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement and the Water Policy Center, it gives me a great pleasure to extend a warm welcome to our distinguished speakers, chair, and participants who registered for the event. This is the 10th and the last session of the day. To chair and moderate this session, it's a real pleasure to have Professor Chintamani Mahapatra here with us. Professor Chintamani Mahapatra, Rector Jawaharlal Nehru University, India. Professor Chintamani Mahapatra is currently Rector, Pro Vice Chancellor of Jawaharlal Nehru University and the Professor of American Studies at the School of International Studies of JNU. He is also the editor of Indian Foreign Affairs Journal. He has held positions such as member UGC Revive Committee, Area Studies Program, member Fellowship Expert Committee, ICSSR, editor Indian Foreign Affairs Journal, member Editorial Board Strategic Analysis, IDSA, member Editorial Board, Diaspora Studies, and member Committee on Studies, Academy of International Studies, Jamia Millia Islamia. Professor Mahapatra has authored 4 books, 1 edited volume, and has contributed chapters to about 30 edited books. He has published about 70 research articles in reputed journals. He has been awarded a number of international fellowships such as Fulbright Fellowships, Commonwealth Fellowship, and visiting fellowship to undertake research in the US, UK, Austria, Australia, and many other countries. He has been a visiting faculty in several UGC, run academy staff colleges, the Foreign Service Institute of the Ministry of External Affairs, National Defense College, Army War College, Naval War College, and the College of Air Welfare. Without any further ado, let me now request Professor Chintamani Mahapatra to moderate the session.
Thank you very much for that nice and rather long introduction. This is a great honor. I thank Dr. Pramod Jaswal for giving me this opportunity not only to chair the session, but also to meet old friends, some of them after decades. So this, in a way, is bringing the intellectuals from across the world together. And that itself is a great thing that we can learn from each other after a long time and discuss issues which are so relevant and which is going to affect every individual in the world. There's the post-pandemic global order. Now, pandemic is not over. And we are going to talk about the post-pandemic situation. Yes, it is important. We cannot wait until the pandemic is over and then talk about the post-pandemic global order, because as human beings, all of us at some point of our life believed in astrology and always think about the future. What is going to happen? So the intellectuals are not astrologists, but they are trained analysts. So it is always good to listen to people who are trying to understand the present situation and look at the future. If things continue this way, or if things come to an end, how the world order is going to look like. Now, chairpersons generally give long lectures, which I'm not going to give, because I'm eager to listen to all the paper presenters. And maybe in the end, if time permits, I'll make my own set of observations, very briefly, of course. So without wasting any time, we have say about six speakers, and everyone should speak for about 12 to 15 minutes, maximum 15 minutes, so that we have some time for good discussion and exchange of views. So without wasting any more time, let me welcome all the speakers in this particular session, Dr. Irina Pop, then Professor Sumit Ganguly, Dr. Ariel Gonzalez Levagi, Dr. Amit Gupta, Leonid Nersisian, and Professor Timofey Bodachev. So to start with, Dr. Irina, the floor is yours now. Try to complete in 12 minutes, maximum 15 minutes.
Thank you, dear Professor Mahapatra. The fight against COVID-19 should be a time for countries to work together, to come together, to confront a common enemy. But we have the questions, and we see all of us what is happening now. My first point is about the antagonism between the United States and China, which is deepening to the point of becoming irreparable. When President Obama took presidency in 2009, his administration realized already that China was a reality which cannot longer be ignored. Competing against China at the time would have had drastic economic results. For this reason, this period was characterized by increased trade agreements and the prospects of progress for both of them. While Obama tried to maintain the position of the United States on the world stage, basing on multilateral actions together with historical allies, and of course, he let open the door for new potential partners. Well, when President Trump got to the office in 2016, the America First policy was, in fact, we can say the valid recognition that the US was no longer the sole superpower, as well as it represented a rant against evidence, a kind of Charles cry on international stage. Trump's aggressive approach of soft power had no other effect than accelerating the prospect of a new multipolar world. The second point, we have the United Nations Security Council, which is incapable of addressing the pandemic crisis. And on the other hand, we have the World Health Organization, which has lost from its credibility. Third, European Union. European Union has once again demonstrated that it cannot deal with the crisis effectively. It still lacks the unique foreign policy. Fourth, Russia and China have launched their own forms of information warfare using fake news and disinformation campaign in this pandemic crisis. Fifth, we have countries such as Taiwan, Hong Kong, Vietnam, South Korea, which successfully fought with the COVID-19. So we can say that the new coronavirus is a kind of contest to determine what type of state and what type of society would prove to be more resilient. This contest doesn't mean that I agree with it. The victors of this competition will be the states where the casualties can be kept to a minimum while economic and social activity is preserved to the maximum extent. Failure to achieve these goals will increasingly damage the legitimacy of any type of political system. Talking about governance, the conversion to a contactless economic and social system during the current pandemic has involved various initiatives in online medical care, education, teleworking, unmanned delivery systems, and so on. And we have the problem with data governance. The societies that succeed in establishing a form of data governance which is acceptable and supported by citizens will emerge as the future developed nations. Regarding the World Health Organization, we saw the lack of enforcement of power and a funding stream which is based currently 80% on voluntary contribution of countries and international NGOs. So we can say the World Health Organization needs a new funding form that allows it to transcend and be over the country level politics. Regarding strategies, especially national security and economic security, states must mix presently trade strategy and industrial policy with investment and currency strategies. it should build more on public-private partnerships and strengthen national power, wealth, and resilience. And I emphasize resilience and develop the political strategy to sustain these achievements. Regarding soft diplomacy, in spite of information warfare tactics, many thinkers point to the growth of China's soft power. We observed this perception that China was capable of containing the virus due to both its diplomacy in cooperative actions surrounding the pandemic and propensity to invest in other parts of the world. At the same time, Donald Trump's indifference to some countries has resulted in a more pronounced decline in American soft power. Several conclusions. The economic depression caused by the COVID-19 pandemic will shape, I think, a multipolar world order. Regarding China, closed borders and limited businesses don't favor the Chinese economy, which is based especially on exports. On the other hand, the role of China could be further damaged by the reaction and how the international community condemns its initial response to the virus. On the other hand, Trump's movement to withdraw from World Health Organization and his failed attempt to rebrand SARS-CoV-2 as a China virus may suggest us that China may win this competition in the area of rhetoric with the United States. About multilateral organization, I believe that China will increase its presence and influence, especially when we talk about the economic aspects of the liberal order. When we talk about humanitarian intervention or human rights, of course, I think it doesn't approve that. Talking about the United States, I think presently they are damaged from every direction because the pandemic has emphasized social divisions within the country, racial problems, underline the incompetence of the political class, and of course the aspect that the scientific community was neglected when it comes to delivering national policies. I think the international support for Trump's presidency will further decrease. This will indirectly have an impact on American hard power, with military operations that are less and less supported by international allies. This could be an opportunity for China to catch up from a military, economic, and logistic point of view, while growing its influence in other areas such South China Sea, South Asia, Middle East, Africa, and so on. Talking about European Union, it depends on whether European Union will learn from its mistakes, and it has the possibility to become more connected and more political and economic connected area. And of course, European Union can have maybe it has I'm missing the word right now. It has potential to become the new moral superpower, if you want to say. Talking about Russia, it's not clear yet how we'll manage the COVID-19 pandemics. However, when we think about how the United States has struggled to impose their will in Syria and Turkey, we see that Russia was more successful, and Russia has gained influence in the Middle East in the last decade, we can say. About India, as many other countries, I believe will be affected by the United States-China rivalry, and it had to decide whether to have a mutually exclusive networks with both these countries or pick a side. Personally, I believe that first option is better, and of course, we have to wait what it will bring American presidential elections. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Irina. I think your brief presentation is full of ideas.
Thank you very much.
It is quite thought-provoking. The first
Thank you.
point that you said that we are confronting a common enemy. I remember just after a couple of weeks of this coronavirus pandemic, I wrote an article and I spoke in many webinars saying almost a kind of third world war is going on. And
Yeah.
this war is not between nation states, but between the humans and the non-humans. Then we should expect that humans will be united and together in combating the coronavirus. But that did not happen, and you brought out very beautifully how the US-China tension and some kind of confrontation is going on through the pandemic. That's a very good takeaway point. Then you talked about China's soft power. It is very interesting how you look at it, because on the one hand, one can say that the way China could win over the coronavirus in the battlefield, initially it appeared as if the whole world is going to look at China for inspiration and support to fight the coronavirus, but it is also happening in a way that people are putting blame on China for starting the virus and not telling in time, so that can actually create problem for the Chinese soft power at the moment. And the Americans, Donald Trump was very unpopular, but the way he tried to paint the Chinese black, and the number of Americans who are dying every day, some kind of sympathy is going for the United States and some kind of dislike is going towards China. Then you talked about the multipolar world order. You thought the world is going to be more multipolar. And you talked about the European Union being a moral superpower. This raises a question. There are people in the panel as well as outside who may be thinking that maybe this is the end of the superpowers. Many countries don't have trust in the United States, and China is yet to build up that trust, no matter how much of RMB they are going to invest around the world. Even the supply chains are going to be disrupted. So maybe we are going to see a multipolar world where this kind of superpowers will no longer be there, and many countries will play ball. Right. But overall, it was a very good presentation, very thought-provoking,
Very
and
much.
thank you very much for your brief, timely presentation. Let me
Thank you.
now move on to Professor Sumit Ganguly to make his presentation on South Asia after the COVID-19 pandemic. Irina talked about the globe, and Professor Ganguly is going to talk about South Asia. Professor Ganguly, the floor is yours now.
Thanks very much. And my thanks to Pramod for organizing this meeting in the first place. And Dr. Pop gave us a kind of a global view. I will focus much more directly on South Asia, and I will make 3 points in the course of my presentation. The first challenge that I see South Asia facing, and nowhere is this more evident than in India, is the challenge of restoring economic development. I just read an article by Professor Kaushik Basu, who's a professor of economics at Cornell University, and also was the economic advisor to the government of India during the Manmohan Singh years for an extended period of time, and is considered to be one of the world's great economists. And he suggests in this article in Live Mint that the Indian economy might contract by as much as 16% this year. This is absolutely disastrous. Already pre-pandemic, economic growth for a whole variety of reasons was already beginning to taper off. But having said that, it was at least in positive numbers. People were, of course, dismayed because economic development and economic growth was beginning to fall off. But no one had anticipated this disastrous impact that the coronavirus would have, and the consequences, particularly for India's poor, who are one sort of illness away from dire poverty. The consequences are really going to be truly drastic. So the principal challenge for South Asia and for India is going to be how to restore a pathway to economic development. It is interesting to note that the country that has the lowest mortality rate in all of South Asia is Sri Lanka. And that's not surprising. It's not surprising because Sri Lanka, despite civil wars, despite political unrest, despite political turbulence, has always had an excellent public healthcare system. That's also true of the southern Indian state of Kerala, which has done an exemplary job of containing the virus. It can't be said for all of India, and certainly can't be said for the central government, which has made a series of sweeping decisions without much thought to the long-term consequences of those decisions. Matters are, of course, quite dire in other parts of South Asia. And consequently, the principal challenge that I see for all the economies of South Asia is to restore a pathway to economic development. Because since South Asia has been witness to a whole range of natural calamities, from massive cyclones, from collapses in food production, with the specter of famine sweeping across entire regions. Particularly, I'm old enough to remember the prospect of famine in Bihar in the mid-1960s, when literally there was a Malthusian fear, which fortunately did not materialize. But so South Asia is hardly a stranger to epidemics, to natural disasters, to crop failures and the possibilities of famine. But this is an unprecedented development. Because this is a global pandemic with particularly harsh consequences for basically a poor region of the world. So again, to underscore the point, the restoration of economic development is the first priority in a post-COVID world in South Asia. Second, this has also laid bare the need for investment in public health. India invests about 1.9% of its GDP on public health. This is unsustainable. And there's a paradox here. On the one hand, if you go to New Delhi or you go to Bombay or even to Calcutta, and certainly Madras, Chennai, you would discover absolutely world-class medical facilities, which are private facilities, where people from various parts of the world, including on occasion Western Europe and the United States, might come for cancer surgery or hip replacement surgery or knee replacement surgery, and done at a fraction of the cost, with superb recuperative care, with world-class doctors, attentive medical personnel, and they go home healed. Yet, all you need to do is to go to a public hospital in India, and you will be reminded of conditions that prevailed in Dickensian England. And I'm not exaggerating, and I'm not talking merely on the basis of press reports. I have personal experience of visiting public hospitals as a child in India, because once I dislocated a finger while playing soccer, and my father said, all you are is a crybaby. If you're that concerned about your dislocated finger, go to the Presidency General Hospital in Calcutta and they'll take care of you. I got a glimpse of what it is like to go to a public hospital. It was just a state of complete shambles. Matters have not significantly improved in the last 40 years since I last visited. In fact, with population growth, the stress has become increasingly greater, and it's much worse in rural areas. I was at least in a major urban center. And I have also subsequently visited rural hospitals, because once I had a minor problem and was traveling in the Northeast, and it was most convenient to go to a public hospital, and I did. Now, it cost me next to nothing, and that's something that's important in a poor country like India. But it also reveals the extraordinary stress that it has placed on the public health system in India. And it's not very different in other parts of South Asia, with the possible exception of Sri Lanka. And so greater investment in public health is an absolute necessity. It's a vital imperative, because with the rapid transmission of diseases, as this pandemic has revealed, this is not the last time we're going to face something of this magnitude. And particularly with the destruction of forests in the world, with the increasing loss of habitat, of animal habitat in various parts of the world, the possibility of zootic transfer is going to increase. And consequently, we cannot imagine that this is the last pandemic dependent upon zootic transfer. This is going to happen again and again, and climate change, I fear, will also exacerbate this matter with the damage to habitat that is likely to take place. And this is where, of course, I express considerable dismay for my adopted country, where you have a president who is clueless and who is resistant to scientific and medical information, and is leading us directly into a state of complete disaster, with 170,000 Americans dead, and a president who blithely says on television, it is what it is. I mean, the callousness, the fecklessness, the thoughtlessness of this remark hardly requires further commentary. The third point, and this is where I will end, I promise, that because I see future pandemics looming over the horizon, there is a fundamental imperative to promote greater cooperation in South Asia. SAARC, sadly, is virtually a moribund organization. Pramod and others living in Kathmandu know only too well. The SAARC SAARC's accomplishments are really quite minor. But this is a moment to revive SAARC. And this is an issue that transcends politics, that the states in South Asia will continue to have political differences. The Indo-Pakistani conflict will remain with us. Other issues of water sharing with Bangladesh and India will remain. Various issues will remain between India and Sri Lanka. These are inevitable. But this is one area where political scientists have talked about epistemic communities, communities that are bound together by bodies of common scientific knowledge, which can be brought to bear to focus on common problems. This pandemic threatens us in a way that almost nothing has threatened the region before. And with the possibility of future pandemics looming ahead of us, it is absolutely vital that under the aegis of SAARC, efforts are undertaken to promote scientific and medical cooperation. Short of this, we face a truly grim future in South Asia. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Professor Ganguly. Professor Ganguly has been an eloquent speaker, a prolific writer, and he has been looking at South Asia for decades now. So all these three prescriptions that he gives are very welcome. One is we must restore the economy. Second is invest more in public health. And third is regional cooperation. In fact, at the moment, when people around the world are debating whether globalization is going to stay or it is going to wind up, some of them are suggesting probably regionalism is going to be more important in the post-pandemic era than so-called globalization. So he's suggesting that there should be more and more South Asia cooperation. In fact, let me underline that it was Prime Minister Modi who took the initiative about creating a SARC fund to combat corona pandemic. This kind of initiative was not done in ASEAN or even in European Union. Now we are trying to talk about regional cooperation at a moment when European Union, one of the best example of regional cooperation, is almost facing an existential threat. Initially the Eurozone crisis, then you have the Brexit, and then the pandemic, and we know what kind of exchanges took place between the Greece and the Italians and the Spanish and the Germans. So, but his prescription is very important, that regional cooperation is important. And in fact, when I was listening to him, Professor Ganguly looks at South Asia from USA, I look at USA from India, then I thought for a moment that I can make the same argument. Imagine the millions of people who are out of jobs in the United States. In a rich country like the United States, you have poor people who are homeless in millions. Then, of course, you know the condition of the African American community in the United States. So, and then about the public health. There are many people in the US that don't go to the hospital because they think that they will be dying an isolated death. Other people cannot afford to go to a hospital and all. So, situation in countries like India and USA with so much of contrast, the recommendations given by Professor Ganguly are valid both for USA, where 45 million people don't have even your health insurance, and they have a lot of problem. Now in a country like India with millions of people, and there is no access to good public health. Thank you very much, Professor Ganguly. Now let's move on to the third speaker, Dr. Ariel Gonzalez Levagi. He is the Executive Secretary, Center for International Studies of the Pontifical Catholic University of Argentina, Latin America. So, Dr. Levagi, now the floor is yours.
Well, thank you a lot, Dr. Mahapatra. I am very glad to be invited, especially I would like to thank Pramod as well for this invitation for this interesting and global webinar. And also I am very glad to provide something kind of a Latin American perspective, something that usually I think in India and in Nepal is not so usual. So I will try to come up with some arguments about the prospects of Latin America in a post-pandemic world. So same as Sumit, I am not so optimistic about the future of our region. Actually, my presentation will be based on three main topics: the challenge of economic development, the challenge of political institutions, and the geopolitical challenge. So regarding the first topic, the economy and the consequences of this global pandemic crisis, Latin America is not in the best shape, and is not in the best moment. Actually, the International Monetary Fund forecasts that the region will fall beyond 9% of the GDP. So this is catastrophic, and it will have like long range consequences, not only in terms of regional growth, uh, um, um, like per capita income, but also in terms of social inequity, in poverty. So this will be a backlash of several decades in which the region has struggled mostly positively, now trying to limit these two structural problems, poverty and inequality. So in that regard, the economic like earthquake that we are going through will have like more consequences in countries with have a very tough context. I'm talking about for example, Caribbean countries that they depend most of a huge part of their GDP on sensitive sectors like tourism. I'm talking about Venezuela that before the pandemic was going through an humanitarian crisis, and of course, the Venezuelan economy is basically bankrupt. And also some countries that have a more internationalized economy, especially those who are in the Pacific Alliance. I'm talking about especially in the South America, Chile, Peru, that actually last year with Ecuador have very huge demonstrations and with some huge amounts of violence. So I think that's the core economy itself provide a green picture of the near future, but also it will have a lot of social consequences. So this is the first argument. So the economic trends in the regions are not so helpful and not so optimistic in the short and mid-term. Regarding the second point on political institutions, of course, in terms of economic turmoil, um, like democratic institution, democratic norms seems to like go to a second phase. So there is no such like public interest to support some this kind of norms if the people are going through economic shortage. So in that regard, I think I'm going looking at the last trends in the region, especially for example in Brazil, we are looking some regression in political and democratic norms. So the pandemic will reinforce those coalitions or both political and groups supporting it that can be remarked as a return to the past. Latin America for many decades was a region of a struggle between military and civilians. There have been like plenty of coups, especially during the Cold War. So in the last 2 3 decades, really there was a really positive development towards democracy. So I think this is at risk. And this is not because the military wants to involve in politics, but it's also because the democracy in the region is losing ground. Losing ground, we can see in the service about the belief in democracy, and also because the consequences, I think, of this pandemic, that in which most of the countries are going through very like tough like social like distancing, but also regarding with quarantine like kind of measures. For example, in Argentina, we are almost, yeah, in the next 2 weeks we will have a 6 month quarantine. So that is almost obligatory for mandatory for many sector of the economy. So in that regard, there are criticism about how this challenge, how this affects individual liberty. So this is something that will be on the regional agenda, especially because in many countries, not in Argentina, by the way, the military are still a strong actor and have very appreciated by the societies, especially for example in Brazil or in Colombia. So this is my second argument. So we are facing regression of the democratic norms, and it's very likely in the future we will see that trends like enforced. So finally, I think this is related to the global like sphere, and also I think in Nepal and India we are facing it. We are going through like tremendous transformation in global affairs, with the rise of China, with the return of Russia, with the retreat in some sense of the United States. And Latin America and the Caribbean are not strangers to these consequences of this new international stage. So the COVID-19 crisis has also affected a series of geopolitical issues. For example, it has been deepening the regional atomization, expressing the lack of regional collective leadership and project. Maybe you recall in the past about this South American initiative like the Union of South American Nations, or even like more limited regional initiative like Mercosur or Pacific Alliance. Well, all this stuff is in crisis. So there is a crisis of regionalism that is manifested in the limited regional responses to technical issues like, for example, the COVID-19. There wasn't regional cooperation to tackle this issue, but also the region has not enough state resources to develop this kind of, or to respond collectively to these kind of challenges. So the crisis of regionalism, in which the regional agency is weakening, in addition to lack of state resources and less like income because of the decline of all the economic indicators. Well, I think it will affect the weight of Latin America in global politics. Latin America will be more focused in itself. And at the same time, it's an opportunity, especially for those rising powers like China and maybe India, that want to like rise the profile in the region, both by economic economic development and investments, as the case of India and China. But in the case of China, I think there is something more, and it is regarded to finding a ground in the backyard of the United States. So all this competition on the 5G and strategic investment in like sectors like ports. Well, I think this is something that is going on right now. China has been very assertive in the region, especially, for example, with the mask diplomacy. I think this will be one of the indicators of an upcoming geopolitical turmoil in the region, in which both economic shortage, democratic like norms crisis, and also a new geopolitical like challenge in the region can lead to a really troubled problem. So in general terms, Latin America need to improve multilateral engagement, support for democratic and human rights norms, and push for collective leadership to gain agency in global affairs. So I hope in the future, the leadership of the Latin American countries could be like assertive enough and strategic enough to go in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Levagi. You are from Latin America, and Latin America always stimulates the mind of analysts and the political scientists, the theorists. You know, your area is a great area of experimentation. At one time, you accepted Washington consensus, and you did pretty well. And suddenly, Latin America realized that Washington consensus is no good. Then you went away from it. Then we realized that you became increasingly dependent on the Chinese economic growth. The Chinese went on buying your commodities, and many countries in Latin America became more and more rich. And today, when you have US-China confrontation, how it is going to be played out in your part of the world is a big concern. But the main point you also highlighted about the democracy. There was a movement movement towards democracy in Latin America, and now because of the COVID-19, you know, your area is affected as badly as any other part of the world. Professor Ganguly talked about South Asia, and Irina talked about Europe, and I a little bit talked about USA. Everywhere you have this problem. There is a possibility of growing inequality and poverty everywhere in the world. World Bank would say 100 million people are going to be pushed into poverty. So whatever achievement the world had shown about poverty alleviation, that is now all becoming negative. Then you're concerned that if inequality and poverty rises, what would happen to the promotion of democracy or the democratic movement in Latin America? Whether it would go the Beijing consensus way, authoritarian regimes and economic growth. So these are the critical questions that you raised, and I really appreciate your valuable time and your presentation. So far, we have had 3 great presentations. So let me move on to the next speaker, my great friend, Dr. Amit Gupta. He is the associate professor in US Air Force Air War College. He's not talking about post-pandemic. His title is Pandemic Security and the World Order. Amit, floor is yours. Yeah, you have to unmute yourself and yeah. Organizers, please unmute him, Amit.
Yeah, they won't. I've unmuted myself. Am I open?
Yes, please.
All right. Thank you, Chintamani, and thank you, Pramod, for putting together a truly impressive international effort. Let me put it this way. I think I'm enjoying this panel because what we are doing is starting with Chintamani, Irina, Shumit, and Ariel now, and now me. We are putting together different parts of the puzzle to give you a bigger picture. And let me start by saying this. Chintamani was absolutely right where he said, we're not out of the COVID. And in fact, if you talk to epidemiologists, they're saying expect waves of COVID. This could go on for years. Nobody knows. I also agree with Irina that we're going to see a fundamental change in world order. And that's what I want to talk about today. And what I'm going to do is essentially talk a bit about the immediate consequences and then go on to what I think is the future. And look, in January of 2019, I was actually quite depressed because I was looking at the world and saying economic globalization continues. Populism is growing as you see people like Orban, Bolsonaro, Trump, and Erdogan pushing their bizarre economic policies. And we were also seeing the revival of power politics. The old idea that globalization was going to lead to a Norman Angel kind of interdependence was going out of the window, and the US and China were being increasingly hostile towards each other. Along comes the pandemic. And what the pandemic does is, again, Irina talked a bit about this when she talked about the WHO. The fact is traditional structures failed. I won't get into WHO, but I will get into the EU. The Italians faced a huge health crisis. They called the Berlemo headquarters of the EU, and all they got was silence. Nobody in the EU could help them. In fact, people started shutting down trains coming from Italy into their country. There went European integration in one move. Second, states showed their incompetence. I'll give you a simple example. Zimbabwe has 5, at the start of the pandemic, had 5 ventilators. South Sudan had 3. And I'm sure at least one of those was reserved for the president in each country. So you do the math on how bad these pandemics are in these nations. Second thing, which I think is the interesting consequence, was the big powers didn't do a good job. It was small countries which were led by women which did a good job. And I'll give you concrete examples of this. Tsai Ing-wen in Taiwan has done an amazing job. Sanna Marin in Finland, Angela Merkel, Mutti in Germany, and Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand. The reason for this was they didn't grandstand. They went out and talked to the scientists and said, what do we do? And then they took hard choices. And by the way, Jacinda Ardern is in an election year. She didn't allow electoral politics to determine the way she looked at COVID. She said, my responsibility as a prime minister is the health crisis. Now, the third thing which came out of it is, I think the big powers, and Irina talked about China, Russia under Father Putin, and of course the United States. The big powers dropped the ball on this. It's other countries in the world which got together. And what's really impressive is you now have something called the Coalition of Epidemic Preventers Initiative, CEPI, which was originally set up by Norway, India, and the Melinda and Bill Gates Foundation. 172 countries have come together. They are funding 9 vaccines. And the idea is when those vaccines are developed, you will see an equitable distribution of those vaccines. Because one of the real concerns I think we should have as citizens of the planet is, will the first set of vaccines only go to the rich countries, or will they go to everybody? And the CEPI COVAX initiative, as it's called, essentially suggests it is going to be given out universally. And I think that is a very positive development. And you didn't see it come out of Beijing, you didn't see it come out of Washington, you didn't see it come out of Moscow. This was a sort of a grassroots national movement, if I may put it that way. Third thing which was interesting is small countries which you don't look at as great medical providers turned out to be the heroes. And I'll give you the classic example of this is Cuba. The Cubans, after Spain and Italy went into a health crisis, sent medical brigades. Because the Cubans for years, and Ariel knows this, have sent medical brigades to Venezuela and other places to look after health issues. So again, what you see is leadership coming from nations which are not the traditional holders of power in the international system. So, which then brings me, I think, to the future. And here's the thing, go back to January when everybody in the world was screaming deglobalization. Well, thanks to the pandemic, we've gone back to globalization in one big way. My old friend, the late Benjamin Richard Barber, wrote an article 25 years ago called Jihad versus McWhirr, where he said the world is coming together because, amongst other reasons, scientific imperative. And what we've seen is the smart countries of the world have put aside nationalism, have put aside power politics, have come together to find a global solution and are learning from each other. They're transferring data to each other to deal with this issue. And where does this go in the future then? And let me talk about the future this way. One, demography will determine the way we think about world order. And here's what you have to look at. If you look at the European Union, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Australia, and even the United States, they're all aging countries. And in aging countries, old people are the ones who are most likely to be affected by the pandemic. There is going to be a huge push towards healthcare. Boris Johnson, the great leader of Britain, kept saying, the NHS pandemic, until he was thrown in the hospital in intensive care. Now he's become a great believer in state-led healthcare. So the push from citizenry is going to be for increased healthcare, better services, so on, which means you have to reduce defense expenditure. The second thing, if you look at the future, and Irina talked about this, Shumit talked about this, a large percentage of the global population is young. In India, the median age is 27. In Pakistan, it is 22. In the United States, there's a very interesting dichotomy. White people in America, their average age is 56. Minorities, it's 27. Hispanics is 19, okay? And Hispanics are going to be the largest population in the United States by 2045. Any good political leader, any good state has to talk about how do you develop opportunities for the young in a COVID orientation, which is, if you look at it, going to be extremely dependent on digital technologies. And this is going to be something that we are going to have to work on around the world. In the city of New York, 40% of the children do not have access to computers. How can you do online education? And you could do this around the world. India is a good example. Nepal is a good example of this. The political leadership that provides a vision for the future is the one which will succeed. Second thing I do want to say is, in terms of global power politics and so on, forget about tanks and aircraft and ballistic missiles and nuclear weapons. This is all Cold War stuff. It is the country which provides a soft power vision for global development, which is going to win. And what I mean by that is, how do we increase, and you've all said this, so I'll just cover this briefly. What is our global health order vision? The first country which comes out with a vision for a global health order is going to be the one that leads the world. That would be my second point there. And, also the one which comes out with a vision for a global digital order. I think one of the things which has become very clear from the pandemic is laptops are a human right. Because how are children going to be educated now? Ventilators are a human right. So we have to start focusing on these things if we want to succeed in a pandemic world. I agree with you, Chintamani, it's not post-pandemic yet. Third thing I want to say is, don't count out the Chinese. There's a lot of writing about, well, the Chinese were the villains, the Wuhan virus, the China virus. It'll be interesting to see in this race for vaccines, if they come out with a vaccine, how they distribute it. And they've already talked about, well, we may give a lot to the poor countries. The EU, the United States have to start talking about this. And, from a South Asian perspective, I should point out, Oxford Laboratories went to Serum Institute in Pune and signed an agreement. And India signed agreements with all kinds of countries, Germany, so on. They're not signing those agreements out of any notion of altruism. They're signing those agreements because India is the largest producer of vaccines in the world. So you need this. And it's going to take some time for each country to build up the resiliency to have these kinds of capacities in their own countries. Until then, scientific imperative, you have to cooperate. And I'll end with one thing. I don't want to talk about Father Putin because I find him to be a rather boring human being. But let me talk about what I think is the future. There is a huge grassroots movement around the world to create an alternative vision for the world. And, I am terribly disappointed that COVID came in March. I wish it had come in November of 2019, because then Jeremy Corbyn would have won in Britain and Bernie Sanders would have been the candidate instead of Joe Biden. Both of them were talking the same thing: universal healthcare, rights of the poor, equality, social justice. And that, every speaker we've had has brought those up. And let me say this to end this. Look at the future. And, I'm a baby boomer, Sumit's a baby boomer, Chintamani is a baby boomer. I want to look at Generation Z and the millennials. And if you look at these people, who are these people? Jacinda Ardern, who's 38, Sanna Marin, who's 34, Greta Thunberg, the Swedish environmental activist, who's 16. Okay. Here's what I want all of you to remember. All these people will live into their mid-80s. So Jacinda Ardern will live, add another 45 years to her life till 2065. Sanna Marin will live till 2070. And Greta Thunberg, who's 16, and Swedes live to their mid-80s, will live till 2090. They are going to construct the world order. And I have started saying this when I give lectures in the United States now. 75% of America's workforce in 10 years is going to be millennials. That is, people born between 1981 and 1996. We, the senior citizens, if I may put us there, we have to start thinking in terms of either we resist what they want, which is a greener, more socially equal world, or we sit there and say, how can we help you create the world you want to live in? Because let's face facts, nobody on this panel is going to be alive in 2090 when Greta Thunberg finally dies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amit. I have listened to Amit many times. The way he puts things, it's always different. It is not typical, people who read foreign policy and foreign affairs and international security and talk about big power relationship and who is doing what. It is always a very comprehensive way of looking at things in a totally in a different way. Now, one of the important takeaways, of course, is the way he said that in the future, it's not going to be your bombs or the intercontinental ballistic missiles and your ABM capabilities and all. It is technology. The world is going to be driven more and more by technology. It is going to lead to a digital divide within countries and between countries. Any country which lags behind technology will lag behind in the world of politics and world of economics. Second thing about the vaccine. Now here, of course, one thing I would like to underline, that this virus is mutating so fast that even if you have a vaccine today, it may not work after 3 months or 4 months. That is the danger. The danger is further prolongation of this particular pandemic. Even then, there is a silver lining in the cloud. 100 years ago, when you had the Spanish flu, 600,000 Americans died. Now the number is still under control. 11 million Indians died, and today the number is highly controlled. So, in spite of all the negatives that we think about and focus on, life is today better than before. But even then, this vaccine you cannot depend on right now. It is completely new type of virus. Corona is old, COVID-19 is new, mutating very fast. So which vaccine is going to work, which is not going to work, that itself is going to have a kind of dynamic. I'm glad Amit talked about education. 1.6 billion children could not go to school and colleges because of the pandemic. And now, when everywhere different institutions are trying to have some kind of online things, online education, online class is not the replication of your classroom experience. It is different. So this itself will take time. And in the process, the impact on education is going to have a cascading effect on the way you do business, the way you do management, the way you do diplomacy. And so this is a very, very critical thing. And of course, the highlighting of the small states. Everybody talks about big states. Of course, in the pandemic, if you make a list of countries which are affected, the superpowers are affected. The United States, China, South Korea, Japan, all developed countries, Italy, Spain, France, Germany. And the developing countries, the small countries, some of them like Cuba and others, New Zealand and all, Finland, they have done pretty well. So when you talk about the world affairs, it should not be only big power saying this, saying that, and sending a ship here and another counter ship is coming this side to confront. It is much more than that, and Amit is beautifully explained all these things. And thank you, Amit, for that wonderful presentation. Let me move on to the next speaker, Leonid Nersisyan, CEO, Armenian Research and Development Institute. Future of warfare. This is interesting. Warfare with the bombs of the technology. So now, Leonid, now the floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor Mahapatra, and thank you, organizers of this great conference and promote, and all of my colleagues who spoke earlier and gave really interesting ideas. My topic is not really related with COVID-19, but it is related to New World Order. And I think that military technologies are not going to stop developing, and they will change the world very soon, I think. And I will talk about the technologies that are going to change the warfare and are going to affect on the world order. First thing is automated C4ISR systems, which means systems which are integrating command, control, communications, computers, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. So they integrate every mean of warfare. And these systems, along with artificial intelligence, are going to change the warfare very, very fast. And this means that decisions are going to be made very fast because artificial intelligence is making the decisions. And it is almost impossible to counter an enemy who uses such systems, because you will make decisions much slower. And I think all the big countries are developing such systems. At this moment, most of countries are scared to give these systems opportunity to decide themselves what commands they should give. But I think that soon or late this is going to change, because one of the countries is going to use the autonomous systems. Maybe it will be China or Russia, I don't know. And all the countries will be, it would be impossible to stand out and not to do that, because it will destabilize the situation. The second technologies are very important, are unmanned systems. I'm talking about aerial, land, and maritime systems. Same problem here. Soon unmanned systems will be able to make independent decisions to attack targets. And already now, moral side of giving machines right to decide whether to kill or not is widely discussed. And I think in any case, this process is unstoppable, and sooner or later, one country will use the drones with these autonomous systems, and other countries are going to repeat that. And second problem with unmanned systems is that they are becoming very cheap, and even paramilitary groups and terrorists are able to use drones. You can see it in Middle East very oftenly. They have even attacked drones, and they use them pretty effectively. So terrorism can become much more difficult to stop. Third technologies are cheap precision-guided munitions. They were very expensive and affordable only for very few countries before, but today technologies are making them cheaper and affordable even for small states, or technologically not very high states like Iran. We can remember how Iran made strikes to Saudi Arabia oil infrastructure very effectively, very fast. And in near future, in 10-15 years, these unguided munitions can become more expensive than using precision guided munitions. And so massive and sudden use of precision guided munition can paralyze opponent very fast. And this is a destabilizing factor, because if you attack first, you can gain a very, very big troubles for your enemy, and your enemy maybe not will be able to answer you, and you will win very fast. Another technology I want to talk are hypersonic weapons. They're weapons which are reaching speeds higher than Mach 5. This means that they move faster than sound, 5 times faster than sound. And US, China, and Russia are actively developing this kind of weapons. 3 things I can sum about hypersonic weapons is that they are almost impossible to defend from. They reach their targets in a very short time, not giving opponent enough time to make decisions. And they can destabilize existing conventional and nuclear deterrence, because the same effect I talked in precision guided munition. You make a very fast attack, and your enemy is dead faster than he can respond to your attack. Another category of weapons which are very important are electronic warfare and anti-satellite weapons, because effective electronic warfare is almost the only things that can make serious problems for unmanned systems, guided weapons, and C4ISR command and control systems. And same we can say about anti-satellite weapons, which can destroy navigation satellites. And it's interesting that effective use of electronic warfare and ASAT weapons can make warfare very close to that in I don't know, in Second World War or in Korean War, when there was not many technologies developed. So these systems are balancing other systems I talked before. Also, there are some questionable systems which I'm not sure they will become affecting anything. They will become operational. These are combat laser systems, rail guns, electromagnetic pulse weapons, microwave weapons. All they have one problem: there are no energy sources allowing them to work effectively. And new technological leap will be available only with new energy sources, but there is no real scientific hope to develop them in foreseeable future. And talking about strategies, new strategies and doctrines, in this case, we should say that everything US and Russia have, and UK have, and other countries have, this is going to become old very soon. And it should be noted that, as I say, even nuclear deterrence can work very bad in this case. And I think that some new kinds of agreements in the world should be done, because we see that existing agreements are being destroyed by US and Russia, and we are coming to a world without any restrictions on no arms control, almost no arms control already today. And in this case, I think major countries must think what to do, because other way we are going to enter a very unstable world when you can really see a new world war, or you can see one major country striking another and having hope to receive victory in such action. So not only the COVID is problem today, but COVID is a good chance to start talking each other and stop doing this arms race. Thank you.
Okay, Leonid, I think that was a very good presentation. You talked about basically the future of war and the use of technology. Let me just give a few footnotes to whatever you said. One is, of course, the artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is going to be used in a wide range of sectors and not just the warfare. You see, by using artificial intelligence, now in Japan, for example, in Tokyo, there are hotels, five-star hotels. In a five-star hotel, only 7 people are employed. When somebody walks in, a dinosaur kind of figure will come and say, if you want to check in, press A. If you want to pay by credit card, press B. and a dinosaur kind of thing, or maybe a human robo kind of thing, will take your luggage and straight guide you to the room. In a five-star hotel, 7 people. That is artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, machine learning, these have come to stay, and they are going to impact even your warfare in the future. There is no doubt about it. Number two, you mentioned a few, what do you say, some few new technology systems in the warfare. Now, I just would like to add here that most of the advanced countries are doing tremendous amount of research by spending billions of dollars in new and newer systems, and you don't get to read them in military technology or any journals or magazines or newspapers, top secret. So whatever we know is a little bit only. Whatever we don't know, there's so many things going on. About 2 years ago, on a Twitter, I saw one news that South Korea was experimenting with creating a new kind of robots who would be deployed along the border, and if there is going to be war, not the human beings but the robots will fight the war. And immediately I wrote a comment there. Here is the beginning of a new kind of arms race, very dangerous. If the human beings are going to use technology to fight the war, and they will remain behind, those who are ahead in technology can create havoc around the world. So this is another important thing. Now, one point that you could have added, you know, This is about the cyber security because this war is already going on. Phishing, for example, and the way women and girls are mistreated, the privacy is invaded upon. This is a very dangerous war that is going on. Somebody is sitting in a corner in Taiwan can disrupt a computer working in New Delhi or New York. And these invisible enemies are as invisible or probably more invisible than even the terrorists, right? So in times to come, cyber security is going to be a very, very important area where you're not going to see straight direct fight between nation states, but between individuals and the companies and maybe the government backed cyber soldiers and all. So this is this I thought I would like to add as footnotes to whatever you said, but presentation was wonderful. Thank you very much for that. Our last speaker is having some technology problem. He is not able to join us probably. That
Yes.
is why let me make a few. You're going to speak?
No, sir, no.
No, no. Okay, let me make a very brief few points of my own, and then we can have a discussion. If there are questions, we'll take it up. And I request all the audience, if you have any question, you can write down on the chat. And the moment I see it, I can read it out, and all our distinguished panelists can speak on that. And by the time I'm making some of the very brief concluding observations, you can clear your head and write down your questions. Number one, since we are talking about the future, and of course, we cannot talk about the future without touching upon what's happening right now, because the present is going to shape the future, right? One of the important issues that has affected people around the globe, and not many discussions are taking place on the television or in the newspapers, except of course in Indian television on the internal migrant laborers, is international migrant laborers. The international migrant laborers are about 270 million. And imagine all those people who are earning a lot of money and sending it back to home. Their families are empowered, and the countries are earning foreign exchange, and life was pretty cozy for a section of people. That has been disrupted by the pandemic. So it is not a question of people losing jobs in the USA, in India, and in many other countries. Imagine the condition of the migrant laborers. For a country like India, Professor Sumit Ganguly very nicely put about the economic challenges. One of the economic challenges is when we have our own migrant laborers, about 100 million of them, who lost their jobs, went to their hometowns. Some of them had to be quarantined outside their villages and all. That is one. But millions of Indians are working abroad, earning money, sending it back home. And that has an impact on both the national economy and the state economies as well as the individual families. They have lost their jobs. Some of them are coming back to India at a time when there is tremendous amount of unemployment problem in India. So these kind of things are going to disrupt economic and social life in many, many countries, including in Latin America, Africa, Asia, just name it. Second important issue is while the laborers have lost their jobs, a large number of small and medium scale companies have already gone bankrupt and they don't know what to do. And they are thousands and thousands in numbers. If you go a little above that, even in a country like the United States, banks are going bankrupt. Big corporate houses are going bankrupt. So a country which believed in Washington consensus, liberal commercialism, in that country, the government has to protect the industries. It is against the grain of capitalism, but the situation is so extraordinary. What do? The government has to come in. So when we think about the future world order, one point I would like to emphasize that in coming years, the role of the state is going to increase tremendously. Those who are condemning, criticizing too much of governance have realized that without the government coming and standing at this time of crisis, nothing can be done. So in the world of economy, politics, managing society and international relations, the role of the state in future is going to be more and more and more. Number two, the world fought what all of us know as Cold War for 40 years. Now, in those 40 years, thousands of nuclear weapons and high-tech weapons were manufactured and stored in the former Soviet Union and the United States. Was there at all a war between the two? Not even a single time. It was proxy war somewhere, Korea, Afghanistan, Vietnam. The Americans and the Russians did not fight any war front to front. Of course, we know that if they had fought a war, it would have been total destruction of humanity in a total war. That's a good news, no doubt about it. But in the meantime, when we saw the emergence of the non-state actors, whether terrorists or pirates or those who are involved in economic offenses, and then you have international crime syndicates, all those non-state actors posed tremendous amount of challenge to the state and affected international relations. The way multinational corporations expanded, some of them were richer than many, many countries because their income was more than the GDP of many, many countries. They were dictating global political economy. Now, some of you made the presentation that how in coming times, even these non-state actors are going to benefit from the same availability of technology, and they can create more problem than before. So your message, I mean, I'm talking with the panelists, your message is the states must take note of this. The challenge of technology spread and the possibility of the non-state actors using the technology to bypass the state decision making and impacting so many sectors in social relationship as well as international relationship and governance are an important thing that we should take note of, right? Finally, poverty. As I said already, poverty is a curse, and you see poverty everywhere, including in China. Of course, all of us have gone multiple times to China, and we saw how China beautifully replicated the uh, um, developmental marvels of Europe and America in very many cities. But there is another side beyond the Iron Curtain, which the world doesn't know. Even there you have poverty, there you have social polarization, there you have economic division, class division, and all that. So everywhere, this effort towards alleviating poverty, which is going on beautifully, that program has come under big challenge. And just like the economic downturn in almost every economy in the world, the number of poor people are going to be more and more and more, and that will contribute to social inequality, that will contribute to crime in the society, that will contribute to instability in the countries and between the countries. So that is why right now all of us are facing a challenge, and as academics, the only message we can give to the world and to the government that here is a challenge from non-humans. Let us come together, forget our differences for the time being, maintain good health, protect human life. Then we can do whatever competition, conflict, or war later. So with these brief observations, I can see that there are some questions which I can read out. Uh, some of you can take it up. Okay, there is one question from an audience from the YouTube. With the COVID-19, has the healthcare debate taken over human rights? Can anyone pick it up and say something on this, please? You can unmute yourself and speak, any panelist.
If no one else is stepping up, Chintamani, I'll be happy to step in.
Please, please.
I would argue that we really need to start thinking about healthcare as a human right. So we should not think of healthcare as being different from human rights, but should incorporate healthcare as a human right. Already a movement, even in the United States, which has been hostile towards promoting public healthcare. Even here, people like Bernie Sanders made it a point to argue in his presidential campaign that healthcare must be seen as a human right. And if this movement can develop in the United States, certainly it can gather momentum in Western Europe and other parts of the world. And that's what we should be arguing for, that healthcare cannot be seen as a commodity to be purchased, but as a fundamental human right.
I think that's a wonderful observation, Professor Sumit Ganguly. Let me add to whatever you said. I personally believe now, at least in the backdrop of this COVID-19, that healthcare or the health rights, it should not be only just a human right, it should be a fundamental right enshrined in every constitution. Like your right to free speech and expression, it should be a fundamental right. Because without life, what is there? And life is integrated with your health. And in fact, the health and the economy is so integral that if the workers are not healthy, if the people are not healthy, if the managers are not healthy, that is going to impact your productivity. And health being such an important issue both for life as well as the economy, as well as your defense and security forces, it should be declared a fundamental right everywhere. And the governments, irrespective of their types, whether authoritarian, totalitarian, democracy, not so democratic, parliamentary, presidential, I think at least the academic world can say that pandemic has taught us that right to life is important, everybody knows it. So health should be a fundamental right recognized internationally, and maybe there should be a movement, and maybe it should be taken up in the United Nations, and something will come out of it. Now let me read out another comment. This is from Irina. Okay. I consider that having access to healthcare is human right. I would like to see that we are moving more visibly towards human security, putting accent on every life, and that we try harder to accomplish the UN 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development Goals. This is a comment by Irina. Is there anyone who would like to comment on the comment or add something?
Can I add something, Chintamani?
Yes,
Look,
please, Amit, please go ahead.
To go back to the earlier thing, and I think, by the way, Irina's right, and you're right, and I think we all agree healthcare is a human right now. Yeah, but here's how we need to look at this. I think you said this earlier, we're in the middle of a war. And in war, political activity and big picture thinking doesn't happen. 2022, 2023, we will start seeing a lot of thinking on what do we do? Yeah? Because by then, hopefully you have a vaccine, hopefully you have better safety and healthcare precautions in place. But then we can start talking about the future. And I think today's discussion is valuable in that way because it's laying the groundwork for where we head 5 to 10 years from now. That is, can I comment on this COVID-19 Chinese claim thing?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, let me just very quickly say this. You can't blame one country for the eruption of a pandemic. It could happen anywhere, any country in the world, Burkina Faso, Uruguay, take your pick, What you can criticize the Chinese for is the enormous amount of delay that took place for them to release the DNA of the original virus. If you look at Ebola, the world got the DNA within a week, which is why Ebola was actually contained quite effectively. Flip side is it took the Chinese about 3 months to hand it out everywhere. It's not a conspiracy. There's all kinds of reasons you can get into. And I don't call it the China virus because tomorrow one could happen right here in Montgomery, Alabama. But I think one thing that we should have learned from this is when something like this happens, scientific openness has to transcend political requirements. And I'll leave it at that.
I think Amit, you're very right. You're very right. Let me add another point to this. While any kind of discussion on COVID-19 is really scary and we are worried about how to handle this infection, we should also realize the number of people who die every year out of cancer, out of tuberculosis, out of environmental degradation, air pollution, water pollution, much more than what we see today. The real danger is because of the infection, but people are dying in a series of other kinds of diseases. So that is why when we link it up with the health issues, we should take note that the real war is going on 24/7 within the human body and in the society and in the world. That is the health related issues. The bacteria, the harmful bacteria and the viruses and the pollution are the real danger to mankind. And there should be, this is a global common, there should be cooperation, collaboration, irrespective of the nature of government, the size of the countries are concerned. There is another comment by the director of Water Policy Center. He says that there is competition among countries to develop coronavirus vaccine, but we are seeing the emergence of some kind of vaccine nationalism. How do you see the vaccine nationalism and changing geopolitics? His name is Rao Saheb Bavaskar. He's the director of Water Policy Center. So anyone would like to comment on this vaccine nationalism?
Well, I will take a chance. Well, on the one hand, commenting on the healthcare access, I think we have in a multilateral system kind of consensus that this is really a human right that should be like apply for everyone, especially in the global south. Our, I think, issue on not only in my region but in the broader south is about the resources to match these rights. So, and I think that there has been an enormous effort for many countries all over the continent that try to improve the healthcare systems to provide almost like services for the citizens, but it's very difficult to do it with a very limited budget. So, and I think this kind of symmetry that's kind of north-south, like taking like maybe old framework from 17 is still in play. So I think that there should be in the context of this global pandemic, try to reshape a kind of a multilateral initiative to try to improve, especially with technology, the capabilities, state capabilities of especially non-developed, developing countries, and I think this is can improve the not only the healthcare access, but also provide more humanity to the world. So this is one topic. The other topic about vaccine nationalism. I think it's not only about geopolitics, but I think it's a mix of well, who achieve like a breakpoint in technological development. We all see the Putin's announcement about the Russian vaccine that seems to shock the world, but still wasn't go through the phase 3. So I think this is on one side there is a kind of like geopolitical symbolism that is in play, but on the other hand, it's a business. So to like have the vaccine prepared and sell to the world. So for example, in Argentina, we have at least two those agreements between the governments and prospect like project of vaccine that's in development, and they will start producing it, and then if it works, it will apply to the people. If it not, it will go to the garbage. So and the government will pay for it. So I think this is a mix. It's a mix of geopolitical symbolism with, of course, capitalism in play.
Right. Thank you so much for your comment. There is one observation by Dr. Pramod Jaiswal. He says that some media reports state that COVID-19 is China-made virus. Chinese say this is America created. Now, in this kind of exchange of words, one thing we should realize that instead of spending billions of dollars on weapon systems, a single little virus and you can destroy the economy of any country for a longer time. So, anyone would like to say something on this? Bacteriological warfare, biological warfare, nuclear weapons are more expensive, chemical weapons are much cheaper, biological a little more. So
I think I can answer this very short. In this case, we can look at China, we can look at US and at other countries, and we will see that every country in the world had economies destroyed. So even if it was made by Chinese or US, it's out of control, and it showed everybody that that's not a really effective way of warfare. If it was a bacteriological weapon, and I don't believe this theory to be fair, because the country who made it, I'm sure they would have a vaccine ready before applying this weapon.
Right. In fact, in this newer kind of technology emerging every day, if you want to disrupt the economy of a country, you don't need a virus. What you need is to find a way to disrupt the New York Stock Exchange for 1 hour and see the effect. It will be terrible. It will be terrible. So there's so many ways one can do this. Of course, this Tom and Jerry game will always go on. There's no doubt about it. Irina has written a comment for everyone, of course. No matter who created this virus, she thinks we cannot talk about winners in this case. It's a wave that affects people, economies, a circular and continuous wave for several years, maybe. This is just an observation she made, unless somebody would like to add something to this. There are people who take moral position on issues like I did. Actually, I sent a video message through my think tank. I have set up a think tank calling the Institute of Indo-Pacific Studies, and I put my video there, speaking for about 2 minutes on this coronavirus, urging the world that this is not the time to fight or compete. This is the time to unite, because this virus is so infectious. It has entered into every kitchen in 200 plus countries and 13 territories. This is our moral position. In reality, the human nature described by many philosophers have come to play. In fact, in the vaccine nationalism kind of question, let me add, Donald Trump reportedly requested a German company to manufacture a vaccine and sell it only to the United States. Of course, later it was found out the German government had already given money to that company to develop a vaccine. Some people said later, no, this is a false news or whatever, but such a news came. And the moment a country, like for example, Russia today, Russia claims that it has already developed a vaccine. Now, there are many other countries which are saying that we don't trust you. Now, we don't trust you is without verification, but we don't trust you is a weapon. In the world of business, the moment you say that we don't trust you, country A, B, C, D who are about to buy something from Russia would say, oh no, Americans are saying don't trust, it's not reliable, right? So whether vaccine nationalism is there or not, there is a business side to it. It is going to be a real big business, right? Like in case of so many other diseases, medical sector has become big business, a rat race, and it is brutal. And one of my students who did a PhD on this pharmaceutical companies, he concluded that there are certain, I will not name any country or any company. There are companies in countries who, after manufacturing certain medicine in that particular area, he found out that the same medicine locally produced is more expensive by several times in that area than sold to other countries. It is business, right? So, but this is the real life. Morality, nice things are different, but we are academics. Without such nice things, the world will be much worse. So it is always good to have such points of view. It cannot be just one-sided and leave it to the state of nature. Now there is another question by Sanjay Srivastav. Is there any serious discussion going around on how to deal with disruptive technologies? All technologies are disruptive anyway, for some time at least. But is there any discussion, debate going on in the academic circle? Leonid, you can.
Of course, the discussion is going in academic circles, but unfortunately, today we have a serious crisis and in the world, and I can't imagine China, Russia, USA, and some more countries, major countries, sitting around the table and researching and making some new treaties on these new technologies. Maybe that's not the best way to get these treaties, but maybe we will have some kind of major crisis like Cuban crisis before when people will understand that they don't need to have, I don't know, 10,000 or 20,000 nuclear warheads in their arsenal, and that's not solving any questions. And maybe we need a crisis, at least for China, to make them sit around the table with Russia and US. And we know that China is the biggest problem today if we are talking about new armed controls treaties. They are not going to talk with Russia and US yet. Maybe they will come to that later, but now they are not ready to talk. So the answer is yes and no. Academics are talking, but countries are not.
I think we're talking about the New START treaty.
Not only New START, also we are talking about short-range missiles, middle-range missiles, intermediate-range missiles, and so we are talking about nuclear weapons. We see that Iran may get nuclear weapons. North Korea already have them. So the treaties are not working. This is a big problem.
The Chinese are saying that we have 260 odd weapons, and the Americans and Russians have 1,500 to 1,600 warheads. So either we go up to their level or they come down to our level to talk. But at the same time, the Chinese have invested billions of dollars into this R&D on technology of different kinds, including artificial intelligence and all. In China, by using artificial intelligence now, they have been able to develop a system for the legal practitioners. Now, by putting a particular case into the computer, the advocate can find out in a few minutes all such cases fought over the last 100 years and whether the client is going to win or not to go to win. In the hospitals, this kind of robots have been deployed, and they have taken away the jobs of the nurses and other health workers in China. The postmen are unemployed because artificial intelligence has been used to send parcels to different university students, and it is being experimented in 100 different universities in China. They have a plan of China 2025. They want to beat the Americans in their own game as far as technology is concerned. For everything you have a Chinese version, whether WhatsApp or Facebook or Twitter, you name it, they have a Chinese version. So the new technology is going to come more and more and is going to disrupt life. It always happens. When the television came, the cinema halls faced a lot of problem, right? And now when the smartphone and the iPad came, and then the television industry also faced a lot of problem. So this is ongoing. This is ongoing. Nobody can do anything about it. Yes.
I had
Yeah.
two quick comments. One, I disagree with Leonid that arms control treaties are not working. They are not working for a very specific reason. The comprehensive program of action with Iran would have stayed in place and would have limited Iran's quest for nuclear weapons if Trump had not withdrawn so recklessly from that treaty. There was no reason to believe that Iran was in violation of the treaty. There was no evidence thereof. Trump's withdrawal from the INF is another example. There was no reason not to negotiate with Russia in good faith to continue the INF treaty. These are decisions, unilateral decisions, made on the part of an administration that is intent on wrecking any kind of multilateral arrangement, which has no alternative in mind. So let's be clear about it when we say that arms control treaties are not working. If we have a different administration come November 3rd, my suspicion is the US will return to the negotiating table and will seek to restore various multilateral arrangements. So I think we need to be very clear that there is one country that's responsible for wrecking a number of existing multilateral arrangements, not just in the arms control arena, but also in global climate change, in trade negotiations, and the like. So it's very, very important to underscore this point. The one other point I'd make about China overcoming the United States in technology, I don't think so. There is a reason why. Not because I don't think the Chinese are lack innovative capabilities or talent, but one thing will inhibit China, and that's its squalid authoritarian order. Innovation thrives in an open political system when you can experiment, when you can make mistakes, when you can take a plunge. China does not encourage that kind of an environment. It's an environment that is closed. While it is encouraging economic entrepreneurship, it is stifling political and the discussion of ideas. And that, I think, will remain an important constraint on China.
That's a very fair judgment. We have very limited time. So I think instead of asking for more questions from the audience, let me give a minute and a half to all our main panelists. The last thought, maybe food for thought by all of you. Not long speeches or comments, very brief, 1 minute, 1.5 minutes, so that we can conclude in time. We can go in the reverse order or same order. Tell me, what is the best? If you go in the reverse order, Leonid first.
I should give a really short answer to Professor Ganguly because I was not talking about the reasons of why arms controls treaties are not working. We have Trump, and maybe unfortunately we have him 4 years more. I'm not sure who will win. So we have the fact that he withdrew from 2 agreements, and it will be very difficult to get back. It's very easy to tear down all the treaties, but it's very difficult. It's very easy to tear down, but very difficult to sign new ones. And that's very important to preserve what we have today and try to develop it. And I really hope that every idea we we said today, it will some governments will listen to these ideas, and they will have the same ideas, and maybe then we will have a better world. But unfortunately, not every time they listen things that academics are saying, and in many times they are just doing what they think is right, and we see the global problems. And I hope this is going to change. Maybe COVID-19 showed politics that they don't know healthcare better than scientists do. So
Okay,
this is my hope.
Thank you so much. Amit?
Okay, three things very quickly. Technology wars are not determined by who has the best technology. It's determined by who's able to market their technology efficiently. And the Chinese were winning the 5G war until they shot themselves in the foot. And I'll leave it at that. If anybody has a question on that, email me. Second thing is, you can talk disruptive technologies, weapons technology, as much as you like. Ultimately, you have to occupy a country. Ultimately, the US had to go into Iraq. Ultimately, the US had to go into Afghanistan. And keep this in mind about the Iranians. Iran is 4 times the size of Iraq. Iran is 4 times the population of Iraq. Iran is a very hilly country. Leonid knows this because he's from Armenia. I'm sure he's visited. Good luck occupying Iran. Okay? You can have all the disruptive technologies in the world. And by the way, the Chinese say the same thing about the South China Sea. They say, if we have a war with the Americans, we lose. But will the Americans be able to sit around in the South China Sea for 100 years? And that's always the thing you have to keep in mind. The US has been in Afghanistan for 20 years. Now it's, let's pull out. Last thing, read what the millennials and the Zoomers are born after 1997, are saying about the future of the world. Because they have all the time in the world, we don't. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Amit. Dr. Levagi?
Yes, just two very short comments. Both was really interesting discussion. I get a lot of interesting insight from your arguments on health care, on technology, on the future of world politics. From this Latin America perspective, I think is crucial for the future global cooperation to support and stand for global South cooperation, not only politically, but also in these issues in health, in technology. So there are projects, for example, Argentina and Turkey are developing nowadays a joint project to put geostationary satellite together in space, and it seems to be very successful. So we need to push forward for this kind of bilateral, trilateral cooperation in the global South, and I think this could be a way to inculcate the difficulties that we have dealing with the access to technology. On the second hand, and I think that's the future that is coming up. It won't be as maybe the early years of the post-Cold War. It will be more complex, more complicated, both because of the post-pandemic consequences, but also because of the rising strategic competence between the United States, China, and also Russia. So in that regard, I think those who try to focus our energies on economic development should have a prudent approach, not taking sides, but also respecting the interests of the the great powers in a respected region. So in that regard, I think Latin America need to be very cautious about the choices, not to be engaged in this new geopolitical like scenario that is coming up.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Professor Ganguly?
Yes, thanks very much. My thanks to you and to Pramod in particular for you for chairing this session so ably, and for Pramod for organizing, and his colleagues for organizing this in the first place. This has been a most useful 2 hours on a Saturday morning. I'll just make 2 points. First, I want to end on a note of small optimism. The Serum Institute of India has already made it clear that once a vaccine is available and they can produce millions of doses, their first goal will be to make it available to India and to other developing countries. I think that gives us a small element of hope, because the most vulnerable people in the world should have access to the vaccine in the first place. Not that I think that human life matters more in any one particular part of the world, but those who are most vulnerable, who are most susceptible to this pathogen, should have access, and should have either free or very cheap access. And that's precisely what the Serum Institute of India is seeking to do, and hats off to them for this endeavor. One is filled with admiration for their efforts to develop a vaccine which can be diffused very quickly and at very low cost, without thought of making significant profits, at least in the initial phase. In due course, they have to recoup their investment. My second point, and it's a point I made earlier, but I will make it a bit more specific, that this is a moment for SAARC to think seriously about regional cooperation and to create a task force to coordinate future action to deal with similar calamities, so that the wheel does not have to be reinvented when the next crisis hits South Asia. One of the most egregious things that the Trump administration did was to dismantle an existing unit in the National Security Council to deal with global pandemics. And we are paying the price for that right now, amongst other forms of ineptitude on the part of this administration. But this is something that SAARC can do to anticipate the future, to have a task force composed of thoughtful medical and scientific personnel and social scientists to deal with possible calamities that are bound to hit the region again.
Thank you very much, Professor Ganguly. Dr. Irina Lunela Pop.
Thank you. I will point a little bit about artificial intelligence. I think it is a very delicate area. And for example, today I read about Elon Musk with a chip from which tries to connect human brain with computer. Sincerely, I would not like such a thing for a human being. European Union, for example, last year in the spring tried to norm the artificial intelligence within the community, and I think we should focus. We should try to regulate this aspect at a global level, because this artificial intelligence could be used for good purpose or not. And if we can use it in order to, let's say, to help people, yes, but if we to control or manipulate people, no. So I think for the moment, the governments try to gain advantage through artificial intelligence, and I don't know how ready are to discuss this aspect in a global initiative. Thank you very much for everything.
Thank you very much, Irina. You know, in the 1980s, the Time magazine of the United States, in one of the issues, gave the award Man of the Year to computer, right? And one guy wrote a letter to the editor, and he said, human beings commit mistakes, machines do not. And you have. That means he should not have given the Man of the Year award to computer. He's a human being, that's why he has committed an error. Ultimately, human mind will be always more powerful than any machine that the mind creates. However, your point is very well taken that every technology has dual use or maybe multiple use. A knife in the hands of a surgeon is for surgery. A knife in the hands of a thief is to mug somebody. And the technology is the same. The same thing applies even to the nuclear energy. You can destroy the world or you can generate energy. So ultimately, your message is very clear that we should try to control the negative fallout of all kinds of technology. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the best webinars that I have attended in recent months. And all of us discussed themes which are not just one, it is multiple. And all the panelists had words of wisdom. I'm 100% sure I learned a lot. And I have strong conviction that all of you have. And with these brief observations, first I thank all the panelists and Dr. Pramod as well. And exactly in time we are completing this. Such matters take 2 days. We finished in 2 hours, and I think we did a good job. Thank you very much, all the panelists, my friends. And Pramod, I thank you for bringing my friends together. I could not see them for years and decades, and at least I could see them now in the webinar. So now let me hand over to Pramod or who? Pramod, are you there?
I'm here.
Yeah, Pramod, now the floor is yours.
Distinguished chairs, speakers, ladies and gentlemen, as we come to the end of this session, I deem it a great honor to propose a vote of thanks on behalf of NIICE and WPC to all who have graced us with your presence and contributed their parts to make this event a resounding success. First of all, we would like to express our profuse gratitude and sincere thanks to Professor Chintamani Mahapatra for agreeing to chair and moderate the session today. A sincere thanks also goes to all our speakers for being a part of the event and delivering such a comprehensive and convincing presentation. We are really honored to have all the speakers with us here today. We would like to acknowledge our gratitude to our friends from the diplomatic community, experts, academia, media, and different organizations. Finally, I must mention our deep sense of appreciation for our audience who participated in the webinar and those who are watching us live on our YouTube channel. Thank you for your valuable time and attention and for making the session productive with your questions. We are truly honored to have you all with us this morning and hope to stay connected with you in the future as well. Also, do join us at our next session. Thank you so much.